News of the day. Kazimir Kaskasuo will apparently make his debut expected on Saturday. That's against Pittsburgh. That's the second half of a back-to-back. So he's going to be on Hockey Night in Canada. He's going to be against the Penguins, who could very well be getting Sidney Crosby back that night. He likely doesn't play in this game tonight or the next one, but he could be ready for that one after. And, second night of a back-to-back where the Leafs have struggled this year. So what a horrible way to debut the kid. But I've discussed that enough, and on Friday they're against the Islanders, so it's not like there's an easy opponent out of those two. Zach Hyman is also going to be playing in that Friday game against the Islanders. There'd be more excitement and happiness about that if not for the injury to Mitch Marner. Hutchinson has cleared waivers. He goes down to the minors. Nick Batan's also been recalled. So for the Leafs, the flux in this lineup and out of this lineup continues. And there doesn't seem to be an end in sight to it. Just when you're like, all right, everybody's going to be healthy and Hyman's going to be back. Marner got hurt. And then we're here again. John Chayka gets a long-term extension with the Arizona Coyotes, which I totally understand. I've had issues with some of the contracts he signed that I thought were a little bit rich, a little bit too soon. But in general, his numbers, when you look at how much he signed guys for and how they're producing right now, not bad. And so for that reason, and seeing that the team has turned things around, and right now they look like a playoff team, that makes sense that they would give him that contract as the Pacific continues to get better. We'll see. I haven't heard how long this contract is for, just long-term extension. Well, is that 6? Is it 10? Is it 30 years? So at the very least, there's stability in that part of the organization, and it feels like the Arizona Coyotes have really stabilized in general. And I think that's a big part of their turnaround as well. The idea that they're not just trading guys out constantly, bringing new guys in, that they've brought in a lot of young kids and they committed to the rebuild, and now we're seeing the rewards of that. Eric Brandstrom, there's an article on Sportsnet asking whether or not he'd be better suited being in the AHL. I'm making that argument, and I 100% agree. Having watched a lot of Ottawa games this year, I don't think that Brandstrom is necessarily ready for top minutes in the NHL, and I think he needs to be playing top minutes because, remember, this is the guy that after the trade deadline, he was seen as this star player by Pierre Dorian. Look, we lost Mark Stone, but look at this kid we got. This kid's going to be great. If you want to protect that, the best way to protect that is by making sure he's getting top minutes. And in doing that, it might be better off to have him in the American Hockey League right now. Rudolph Balcers has been sent down to the AHL for conditioning, and it's very likely he gets a recall soon, I would think. I don't think he'll spend much time in the American League at all. I would imagine he'll be back up as soon as he shows he can play. Balcers is a good energy player. The offensive upside is there, and Ottawa needs players of that ilk in their lineup. And so he will get that chance, I would think, within a week. I'd be very surprised if he's down for a week or longer. Johnny Gaudreau, mentioned in the Calgary Sun today, turned the puck over 7 times against the Blues, and he's kind of fighting it. Now, on the upside for him, Coach Bill Peters is saying he'll be fine. It's not a problem. It's fine. What you see with players that are going through this, I see it with Pettersson, and I'll also mention Horvat, who has one 5-on-5 goal this season, and he's getting frustrated with the production that's not there for him at even strength. Players start trying to force the puck. And, one thing that you hear often, and I'll say it here, is to keep it simple. I know it's not that easy in the moment for these players. I know that for them there's a lot of pressure, and in Canadian markets there's a lot of pressure. It's not a coincidence that it's Calgary and Vancouver I'm talking about with these guys. The pressure, especially if the team's not playing particularly well, that ramps up on your star players. And they know this, and so they want to go out and they want to perform. They're like, I'm going to get this done. I'm going to do this. This is going to be great. And if I make this pass, if I can stick handle through this guy, and they start trying to make plays that just aren't there. So 7 turnovers against the Blues tells me that, yes, Johnny Gaudreau is trying to force plays that aren't there. And you can see how frustrated he's getting. He doesn't hide his emotions very well. Him and Jack Eichel would be great line mates in that neither of them hide their frustration well at all. There are others. There are definitely others. But they kind of stand out to me somewhat. I guess Taves would be in there too, but you can't have them as line mates because Taves is a center. And So is Eichel. So yeah, we'll see whether or not Johnny Gaudreau is able to pull out of this. Something I wanted to talk about today as well is, and this is something that's been going on now in the wake of what happened yesterday. I think there are some hockey talks to be had and hockey discussions to be had, and I think in any given negative situation, there is a discussion to be had, and hopefully some good can come of any negative situation. So what I want to talk about is the drop in the number of young Canadians playing hockey, and I'm talking little kids. And for people who've been fans of the channel long enough, yeah, our kids, our three kids play hockey. They only play every Wednesday, and it's a homeschool game, so it's the same teams every time. It's the same kids every time, mostly, and it's not an organized thing. Hockey equipment's expensive. Hockey trips are expensive, meaning that they were talking in an article I read out of a Seattle paper about how if you live in Washington State and your kid's wanting to play hockey, you're going to have to come up to BC. And there's some costs that are just prohibitive for families. And the amount of money that families spend on trying to get a player or trying to get a kid just to play hockey competitively. This isn't professionally. I keep wanting to say professionally. It's not there. And those costs keep going up. I know last week they had a sale on Pro Hockey Life, which is a site that sells a lot of hockey equipment. It was 20% off on all equipment. I thought, oh, okay, well, maybe I can, get some new stuff for when we do meetups and that kind of thing. And just the cost, even with 20% off, I was like, that's just high. That's really, really high. And it gets kind of tricky. So I feel for families that go through this. And then the other part of it is that hockey is a dangerous sport. It is a contact sport. And for parents right now, there are some that are saying, I don't really want my kid to be in hockey. That even in the situation where it's not technically contact, they don't allow body checking at a young age. But you can still get hurt. There are still collisions. And there's still the potential that a kid gets a concussion. And that kid is very, very unlikely to ever get drafted, much less looked at as an NHL prospect. They may never even get to Bantam. So when you're dealing with that as a parent, you might say, well, little Jimmy here, he could go out and play hockey, but I could just get him a bat and a ball and send him out to play baseball. There's a diamond right behind the house. So, from a cost perspective, from a safety perspective, hockey seems to lose out now. And football, professional like NFL, CFL football has been losing out for that reason as well, that it's not seen as being as safe by parents. And costs with football can be high as well. But the number of young Canadians has dropped as well, in that people in my generation aren't having as many kids. People in the generation after mine aren't having as many kids either. There are plenty of people who are saying, I'm not going to bother having kids. And I respect that. I don't judge it. I think it's not a bad idea. If a person says I would make a terrible parent, I shouldn't have kids, my answer to that is, at least they figured that out. There are any number of times where you're out in public, you'll see somebody who'll go, man, they don't have the patience for children, do they? Anyways, with the drop of young Canadians that are playing hockey, it means that you're going to have less Canadians being drafted. And while this draft looks really strong for Canadians, and this one should reverse that trend, it's still a trend. So it's one that we're going to see a Canadian rise, when we're having Lafreniere and Byfield talks about who's the best. But the general consensus seems to be that hockey participation in Canada is dropping. And we're also in a position where, like I said, most Canadians aren't having as many kids. So the best solution would be, and I know Tim Hortons does very well with their Timbits hockey to get more kids involved. There needs to be more of that. There needs to be more community outreach, more something to make it so that these kids can play, because we are in a situation where the state seems to be getting better. The States also has about 10 times the population of Canada. And I've always said, if the States ever picked up hockey on any level, anywhere near what it is in Canada, even if it's only 25-30%, the most NHL players would end up being Americans at some point. And I don't think we're there anytime soon, but, Americans, the U.S. national team program is fantastic. It has created some really really solid players. And then when you look at just the other thing with Canada too, and they mentioned this in an article I was reading this morning on it, is that with Canada being such a really large country, and you've got so many young teams, so these kids, these bantam, whatever size league, wherever level they're at, that might be in a really remote location. Well, how do you make sure everybody's being coached well? And for coaches, if you're a pretty good coach, you might be either spreading yourself thin or you're committing to one of these summer elite programs. There's elite programs for kids, and when I see elite, and I see that it's for 7 and 8 year olds, my answer to that is what? Like I get it. They might be very very talented, but you're already singling out. Okay, those two kids are premier. The rest of you guys, yeah, you're okay, and it sort of gives out that message. So I think there's something to be said for not necessarily tagging kids as elite as early as age 7, which seems to happen. And again, it's not because those kids aren't good, because they are, but it's because it may be sending a message to the other kids on the team, kids, who are maybe in talent level from 5th on the team down to 15th. You guys aren't as good as these guys. So, for them, the next year when they're enrolling, they might be like, you know what, I don't want to do it because I'm not good enough. And honestly, hockey should be fun. Like, for instance, when we do the kids' hockey, who wins and loses really shouldn't be a big issue. When we have meetups, just the street hockey and floor hockey, we don't care who wins. We really don't. And it's just for fun. That's why we don't play ice hockey, because if we played ice hockey, everybody's got to have all their equipment, everybody's got to be on skates, and then it becomes more expensive. It becomes far more of a grind, so to speak, like all the prep work and all that, and then after. And as we've been doing it, it's just been this casual thing where whoever wins. Doesn't really matter. If you're not any good, that's fine. But and then when you get into the skating part of it, it's okay. Well, so and so comes out to all the meetups. He's not coming to this one though because he's not a strong skater and he's embarrassed. So, I do think with hockey sometimes it's taken too seriously, and it should be more fun. And I think that's part of it too. You can get a basketball and go out and play. There's basketball hoops all up and down the street here on my block. And street hockey is still played. You can find it just in a cul-de-sac up the street. But it's not played as much. Kids are far more likely to be getting a basketball and throwing it around, which when I was a kid, we did that too, but not as often. It was still mostly hockey. The generation following, not so much. Ratings have dropped in Canada as well. And so while it's a big part of this country's identity, it feels like, 30 years down the road, that could be a very different story. But again, I'd be interested to know what you guys think about how to get kids into hockey and how to make it easier. Like, for instance, they've had kids playing cross hockey, so instead of playing the entire 200-foot rink, you just fence it off and you make it so they're just playing across the rink. So they get, more practice and stick handling, and it's not quite so huge an ice surface with little kids on it. There is something to be said for playing that way, and I've seen people saying that the kids that we have should be playing that way too, but we don't have all the stuff for that. It's not really organized. It's just go out on the ice and play, and after an hour and a half, you guys are done, and you get to go have something to eat kind of thing. But yeah, the number of Canadians playing hockey has definitely dropped. And it's a discussion, and even though it may not be considered news of the day material, it is something that's been taking place. I did see one chart that showed that the number of young Canadians, so 15 and under, playing hockey, or just number of Canadians playing organized hockey, has dropped by, I think it was like 16% over the last 10 years. But again, I'm trying to find exact stats. It can be a little bit tricky. But it does look like the numbers have dropped. And again, you have your economic reasons. You have, and again, cultures have changed. Culture has changed. And it's not just pointing a finger and that's what the problem is. It's something bigger than that. I know just talking to people in general, over the last 25 years. The amount of hockey talk that exists drops a bit. Where it used to be, you'd walk into a room and, all right, so everybody watched the game last night. Now it might be 2 people that watched the game last night. So, yeah. And Rogers is finding out that hockey ratings aren't what they were all cracked up to be. And then in the midst of all this, we're all waiting on that big contract in the States, when that new contract's up and they're going to make all this money and then the salary cap's going to explode. Well, what if the number of people playing and watching hockey has dropped to the point where it's still considered a niche sport and ESPN or whoever looks at that and goes, well, we're not going to pay that much money to air it. So we'll see. We'll see where it's going. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.